Good afternoon, everyone. I am Catherine Brookman, Associate Director, Knowledge Transfer and Exchange, and on behalf of Dr. Jack Callahan, Director of the Center of Research. This webinar is the first in a series of wind energy webinars offered by CRE-MSD with the assistance of our Health and Safety Association partners, Angela Cameron from Workplace Safety and Prevention Services, WSPS, and Dean Dunn from Infrastructure Health and Safety Association, IHSA. We are grateful to the Ministry of Labor, Training, Skills and Development for our funding, which supports the delivery of these webinars, and of course to our presenters and collaborators. We are using a new webinar presentation platform, and therefore we ask that you keep yourself muted for the duration of the webinar until our Q&A session. Use the microphone icon in the floating control panel that appears near the bottom of your screen. Please use the chat feature to communicate during the webinar. The chat box can be pulled up on your screen by selecting the chat icon in the floating control panel that appears near the bottom of your screen as well. This webinar will be recorded, with the recording being made available to you on our website in the near future. Shortly after today's webinar, you will be provided with a copy of the presentation slides along with an evaluation. Please fill out this evaluation as it will assist us in our future delivery of these webinars. The format of today's webinar is as follows. The presentation will be given, after which time we will have 10 to 15 minutes for a short question and answer period with our presenters. Again, we ask that you type your questions into the chat box, at which time I will relay these questions to our presenters. Should you have a pressing question or issue, such as a technology glitch that cannot wait until the end of the presentation, please type this into the chat box and we will do our very best to address it right away. Now it is my pleasure to introduce to you our two presenters for today. Dr. Stephen Fischer is a leading ergonomist and workplace injury prevention researcher. As director of the Occupational Biomechanics and Ergonomics Laboratory at the University of Waterloo, Stephen and his team study determinants of movement behavior in the workplace, applying this knowledge to improve work-related functional capacity evaluation, work simulation using digital human modeling, and proactive injury prevention through the design of better, safer products. Stephen's research has been funded by industry partners, including Ford Motor Company, Stryker Corporation, CBI Workplace Solutions, Gentex Corporation, Thumbprint Solutions Inc., Defense Research Development Canada, and the Canadian Safety and Security Program. In 2014, the Canadian Armed Forces Surgeon General presented Stephen with the Banting Award, recognizing his leading ergonomics and workplace injury prevention research, which is aimed at improving the health and well-being of our Canadian Armed Forces personnel. Stephen has published more than 50 peer-reviewed papers, presented at over 100 conferences and abstracts, and has raised over $3.5 million in funding to support his research. We are thrilled that Steve is able to join us and make this presentation possible today. Our first presenter is Phil McKay. Phil is the Program Director, Operations and Maintenance at the Canadian Wind Energy Association. Over the past 4 years, Phil has led Canadian Wind Energy Association operations and maintenance from inception to an industry-wide network of wind energy operational professionals focused on the development of best practices, creation of industry-leading reports, grid integration advocacy, and enhanced collaboration across Canada. With a background in wind farm operational research at the University of Windsor, applied engineering skills at the Wind Energy Institute of Canada, and a number of years designing efficient thermodynamic systems in the automotive sector. Phil is motivated by the intersection of renewable energy engineering and a sustainable society. As the Canadian Wind Energy Association Operations and Maintenance Program looks to expand from wind energy to include solar power and energy storage, the opportunities to further impact the renewable energy sector and its sustainable development, including human factors, health and safety, are a primary focus of Phil's work. We are thrilled that Phil is able to join us today and present to us what is happening in the world of wind energy. So over to you, Phil.
Thank you very much. And can you hear me okay, Catherine?
Excellent, Phil. Thank you.
Great. Well, thanks for that. It is very exciting to be here. This is a really interesting gathering of people. I think there's a lot of potential on the line here today, and I'm excited for what we can do together. We're going to share a little bit about what we've been studying with Steve and some of the results that have come out of that. But I'm going to give you a little bit of a highlight up front about the renewable energy industry as it stands right now, just briefly. What we're looking at in Canada today, some of the growth, some of the demographics of our workforce, and what has led to this project in the first place. So I'll be brief, but excited to have you thinking about this with us. It's nice to have this brain power on the line. So if you have ideas, notes, thoughts along the way, please do share in the chat box or reach out to me afterwards. I am really keen to learn from what you have learned in your various workplaces as well. So just a little bit about CanWIA. We are representative for the wind energy industry in Canada. I mean, we are active coast to coast. The wind energy is in all 10 provinces and 2 territories at this point. We are growing. There's a lot of work to do. Just like you, we are also navigating COVID-19 and all that entails. Things seem to be okay at the moment. As an energy producer, we have been deemed as an essential service, so we've been able to keep our turbines spinning and keeping folks employed. But as with everybody else, things are uncertain at the moment. As was mentioned in the intro there, we're expanding what we do to solar and energy storage, and that comes through a merger with the Canadian Solar Industries Association. So as of July 1st, we will be the Canadian Renewable Energy Association. So just want to make sure that you're watching for that name change. I mean, we are very excited about the potential here of what we can do together. There's a lot of synergy between these technologies. And so we're going to roll that out certainly in the installation and the power generation side, but thinking operations as well, which is where I'm tasked. There's a lot of interesting things we can do together, even in things like ergonomics and human factors. Very briefly, wanted to share a little bit of perspective that we're looking at through this chart from the International Energy Agency. So here's a bunch of generation sources that globally speaking are expanding. If you look at the lines, the yellow and the orange line there, wind energy and solar, PV is photovoltaics, that's power generation from solar. The growth is expected to be quite large. And that's grounded in, you can see the past experience up till 2020 and then beyond. What that means, though, are a lot of new people joining that workforce. So this is construction, operations, the whole life cycle of these projects. And that's going to bring in a lot of new faces. It's going to bring in some really great experience. It's also going to mean we have some work ahead of us to make sure that everybody remains safe on site and they know what they can do to mitigate hazards. I'll bring it a little closer to home first before I go to Canada, but a lot of good numbers coming out of the US right now. The American Wind Energy Association anticipating a 108% increase in the wind turbine technician role in the next 10 years. solar job census talking about the 150,000 solar jobs that they added from 2010 to 2018. And then in this kind of emerging area of energy storage, we're even seeing some survey results from companies in the US saying, at least 75% of them saying that they don't expect to reduce any employment because of COVID-19. There's a lot of interest there to keep that moving. So it's growing. We are growing here at home as well. And so you can see a little bit of that pathway over the past 20 years or so. We expect this to keep going up. There are a lot of motivators for that growth. The low cost of energy, the drivers of climate change policies and reducing local pollution. We're seeing a lot of corporate investment where the market is right from companies like Amazon and Google as they seek to reduce their carbon footprint and hedge against fuel price fluctuations. And so in Canada, we have a variety of markets and they're structured in different ways. So we see growth in different areas at different times, but it is on the uptake. As we see a pullback in demand for electricity from COVID-19, we do anticipate that to bounce back, and even more so as we continue to electrify transportation, electrify industry, manufacturing, that kind of thing. Some of the benefits that we've seen already in Canada around the investments made here. I mean, you've got a lot of money that's gone into these projects that's coming from private investors, a lot of manpower that's needed to pull those off. And on this third point here of 299 communities, we've surpassed 300 now, and there are impacts in many different areas across the country, including a lot of great interaction with Indigenous communities, with their support, their investment, and employment as well. And all that to say, we also have this whole supply chain that is working in the scenes and behind the scenes to make all this happen. But today, we're not going to talk about solar or storage or manufacturing. What we'd like to talk about is the workforce of wind turbine technicians. So these are the men and women who are out in the field. They are visiting turbines typically daily to maintain them, do annual inspections, to make sure everything's running smoothly, troubleshoot issues, and that sort of thing. And we've estimated around 1,400 technicians in Canada. This particular survey managed to get responses representing about 1,000 of those technicians. So we think this is fairly representative. You can see the concentration of the workforce here. Ontario with the highest installed capacity. Makes sense that we have the highest workforce there, with Quebec a close second. But there is a diversity across the country. But what's interesting here is the age demographic. You've got, yes, a number of younger people coming in to the industry here. It is a physically demanding role. There's a lot of work to do. It's not a desk job, that's for sure. And so we get this demographic of about 25 to 35 years of age. The drop off later on that you see 35 to 45 and 45 and over, there are multiple factors at play here as best we can estimate. Some of those are the physical tasks, right? There's a lot of some heavy lifting. There's ladder climb involved. You're away from heated buildings and that kind of thing. So there's that part of it too. But keep in mind, we're also a fairly young industry. And so with that growth over the past 20 years that I just showed, a lot of these wind farms didn't exist even 5, 10 years ago. And so these are new people entering into the industry that we're able to give jobs in the neighborhood. One of the big attractors that we find is that people really find a lot of meaning in the work. They like to be outside, first of all, but also like to know that they're making a contribution to the climate. I'd also note the diverse range of skills that's required here. So this isn't always the same thing every day. The abilities needed are electrical, mechanical, hydraulic, and even information technology as they're working with fiber optic cables and computer systems and that kind of thing. And these tasks could be happening anywhere from writing a report at a workstation hopping in the vehicle. They could be in the vehicle for multiple hours a day because of the distribution of the wind turbines. You've got ladders and even the wind turbines with service lifts, which are a huge benefit to the technicians. There will be a ladder climb at some point just to get to the last little bit. There's standing, kneeling, lifting, climbing over and around objects, and we'll get into that with some of the survey results here. But just to show that you've got a lot of things to handle. So when it comes to assessing or analyzing the workplace, it's very diverse. Some of it does get repetitive, so there could be a task where you're going around torquing and tensioning a set of bolts, maybe 30 or 40 of them all in a row before you move on to the next set. But a lot of it is also really cognitively engaging. There's troubleshooting, you're trying to find an electrical fault, you're trying to make sure that you've checked all the right things. All this while you've got in the back of your mind, what's the weather doing? We're at heights here. I mean, these towers are tall, 80 meters up, and you want to make sure that you're keeping all that in mind. So it can be quite intensive that way too. So with all of these things at play, the different types of work, the different positions, and things that are being asked of you, safety gets set as number one. I mean, it's been there from the beginning with these wind site owners that safety has to be first because of all these things that are moving. So that has led us to collaborate as an industry. This is one of the areas that we work together on is ergonomics, but there are other things that we're doing as well. And in this particular topic, the way that we've progressed is to say, okay, what do we know? What have you guys studied? What have your international partners studied? And keep in mind, this is a very global industry. A lot of our, even the equipment comes from overseas, and then it's assembled here. Some parts are Canadian made. And so you've got this larger workforce to tap into and ask the whole world, okay, what do we know? So we collected that. We got some good info back from members who had done work with WSPS, Human Factors North, Tailored Ergonomics, Insight Health, and NTRAC. And then we took it one step further and said, okay, we've got all this, and Human Factors North helped us out with aggregating that. They did a global literature study to find what was published, what's accessible, and what are the gaps, what's left over. And that pointed out actually quite a few gaps that we could be studying and working on together. So the next step for us was this really great connection and the collaboration that we've had with the CRE-MSD and Dr. Fischer. Been able to do another literature study, which really helped to see if there's anything else new and emerging, since this is a very developing industry. And then did this survey, which I will pass over to Steve to get into the details of that now. Before I go though, and I will be back to talk a little bit more, but before I go, I'm just gonna play a short clip for you. This is from Eric in Tiverton. He's up tower in a wind turbine and wants to give you a 30-second view of what it's like up there.
Hey everyone, I'm Eric Lane. I'm working here at the Saugeen Shores Wind Farm in Tiverton, Ontario, up in a B82 nacelle. One thing we deal with here is musculoskeletal disorders. In order to minimize these, we do things like daily stretches, maintain 3 points of contact, maintain good posture, and utilize things like handrails to transition from one level to the other.
There you go. I'm gonna pass this over to you, Steve, and you can get started.
Great, thanks, Phil. And thanks, Catherine, for the introduction. So I'll spend a little bit of time here before turning it back to Phil, just to walk through the specifics of the survey, how we put it together, what our focuses were. I do apologize in advance, we have quite a bit of data, so I'll try to walk you through some of that data with the goal at the end of my portion here to tie that back in and demonstrate how that evidence might point us in a few directions for some upcoming actions to mitigate and reduce the potential for MSDs among wind techs. So just so you can see up on the slide here, a really nice quote, and this was from a lecture that was given at a conference 20 years ago now. just kind of read it out for everybody. It can be anticipated that over the next decade, there will be a significant expansion in green jobs, including in the renewable energy sector. With these jobs come both known and new HFE challenges. So I think Phil did a great job of describing the landscape of renewable energy, and particularly wind energy, the role of wind techs, the growth of the field. And then along with that, we know that this is going to bring along a number of challenges. So part of my hope today is that by sharing some of this evidence, we can give folks a little bit of insight and background, especially the HFE professionals that might be on the line, a little bit of info and background that you can use hopefully to help provide support to this industry and address some of these challenges, both known, as we'll talk about today, and the new emerging challenges. So in terms of our process, I'm just showing a graphic. This was from a recent paper describing different frameworks for approaching interventions, and there's a number of these, and everyone's probably seen different versions. But at the crux of it, understanding a little bit about the incidence of MSDs, understanding some of the risk factors for MSDs, regardless of whether it's this Van der Beek framework or others, that's a pretty formative step, which brings us to our goal, where we really wanted to understand, what is happening, what are the aches and pains that people are reporting, what are the MSD hazards that wind techs are identifying, to give us this foundational effort or foundational information that we could use then to drive forward and start to explore some root causes, some specific projects, and address some specific concerns. So again, big picture here, our goal is to identify what job tasks should be prioritized for proactive hazard identification risk assessment, and also, where possible, identify some emergent intervention possibilities. And I'll speak to a few of those in a moment. In terms of the survey itself, we developed the survey by integrating a number of resources that are available on the msdprevention.com website. So for those in the call, many of you are likely familiar with this Ontario MSD Prevention Guideline that CRE-MSD launched now a couple years ago. A number of tools, a number of resources. If you haven't checked out this site, I certainly encourage you to do so. But we, using these available resources, went in and selected some of the different survey instruments that existed. So on the left, a standard body discomfort map. On the right, some questions that would allow users to indicate some of their MSD hazard exposures. And we could take those and integrate those together. So we took those initial items, and then the next step was a cognitive interview process. And for anyone doing survey research, all of the survey instruments that are on the CRE-MSD website are excellent, quite robust, but oftentimes the language might need to be adapted to be specific to a context. So we worked with Phil and Kenwea and his team of experts to take those survey questions and just massage the language a little bit to make sure that it fit and the messaging was consistent with the language that was being used in the wind techs in the wind energy space. And then through that, we were able to generate the final survey that was distributed. We were able to distribute that survey in April 2019. So we launched, with the help of Kenwea, we launched the online survey on April 2nd in English. By April 16th, we were also able to launch a translation in French so that our French-speaking wind techs could contribute as well. And then those surveys were open until the end of April. We had about a month to gather some feedback. We did provide some incentives in the form of gift cards, so respondents were entered into a draw for gift cards. So diving right into the results. First, so tying back to some of the context that Phil mentioned about wind techs, primarily Phil noted that there's a number of wind farms in Ontario, a number in Quebec, and then some scattered in various areas. In terms of our respondents, so Phil mentioned that there's about 1,400 estimated wind techs across Canada. We received responses from about 140, so we're right around 10% response rate. A little bit low for a survey, certainly some reasons why we think that might be the case, but we can save that discussion for later. But when we do look at the representation, on the left there, we see a number of our respondents were from Ontario, which perhaps isn't surprising. a number from Alberta as well. We do notice that the Quebec slice of this pie is likely a little bit underrepresented based on the number of wind techs working in Quebec. So any future work, obviously, we want to make sure that the information we do have from those areas is representative. In terms of years of experience, Phil again mentioned that the workforce as a whole is relatively young, and that the job of a wind tech again is relatively new. But perhaps maybe a little bit more surprisingly, when we look at experience, 5 to 10 years or 10 plus years of experience, about half of our respondents have been in this profession for a number of years. Those that are 10 plus years, a good chance that some of those folks may have started in this profession since the outset. So we were happy that we had a number of respondents from folks that had some considerable experience, but it's also nice that we do have a mix of information from wind techs that are new as well. So diving into some of the prospective job-related discomfort, again, we use the body discomfort map to get a sense of how wind techs felt about their job. So you can see the question at the top that we asked in the survey. And what's really interesting for those that have used these types of metrics before, typically you'll see quite a variation across body parts, so as we look across regions. And what's really interesting is the responses are quite consistent. There's some decrease in some specific body regions, but by and large, what was interesting to us when we looked at this data is, a score of 5 on a scale of 0 to 10 is in the middle of the scale, obviously, but that's suggesting that there's something there. Like folks are feeling some discomfort, this isn't just sort of nominal discomfort. So certainly points in the direction that there are some concerns, certainly suggests that probably want to dive in and take some very deliberate actions. Now, obviously, specific wind farms are on an ongoing basis addressing MSD hazards as they will, but at a population level, this is giving us an indication that certainly this is a good time to dive in and start understanding these MSD hazard exposures and controlling them as appropriate. We asked wind techs what likely causes or aggravates their discomfort, and we did this using an open-ended question format, and then we took those open-ended responses and could cluster them into themes. So you see on the y-axis here a list of themes, and going from the bottom to the top, and we look at postural demands, for example. So over 30% of our respondents suggested that postural demands caused their discomfort. About 20% agreed that postural demands aggravated their discomfort at work. You can see some of the other factors that jumped out: climbing, manual materials handling, torquing, tensioning, small subset related to changing components. So this information was starting to point us in a number of directions around areas of wind tech work that could be exposing them to injury. What we don't see here is things like driving, office work, administrative work, which wind techs spend a considerable time doing. But again, I wanted to highlight what we didn't see to emphasize that the elements of the job, like postural demands, manual materials handling, torquing, tensioning, were really superseding some of those other tasks in terms of wind techs' beliefs about what aggravates or causes their discomfort. A couple questions that we wanted to share the response of. So have you had pain or discomfort during the last year that you feel is job related? Over 75%, as you can see on the left side of the screen here, have had some pain or discomfort that they felt was job related. Do you consider it to be a problem? And just under 50%, so about 40%, suggested that yes, this is a problem. So again, I think this is highlighting the prospective intensity of the underlying MSD concern, and I think giving us some strong indications that a concentrated approach to recognize and address MSD hazards would really be helpful, particularly as the wind technology industry continues to grow. So thinking a little bit about the work that wind techs are doing, we asked them to rate the difficulty of tasks that they perform Again, as you can see on the right of the screen here, we used an open-ended response format. So they told us what they thought was the most physically demanding with varying levels of detail. And then we were able to walk through those and cluster them into overarching themes. So what you see on the left is tasks like climbing and torquing were often recognized as the most physically demanding. And on the x-axis, this is number of respondents, by the way, not percentage. So that would be the climbing bar there represents 100 responses out of a potential 140, just to make sure everybody's on the same page. But again, things like torquing, tensioning, manual materials handling, changing components, postural demands to varying levels are considered physically demanding. What I do want to draw your attention to, though, is just note that climbing is indicated as very physically demanding. Postural demands were not indicated necessarily as physically demanding, but as we start exploring and following up on WinTech's perspectives of injuries, it's really interesting that postural demands continues to jump out as perhaps one of the most challenging aspects of the work from an MSD perspective. And I'll tie back to that in a few slides. This is just a quick example, and I think Phil's video gives a little bit of indication as well of what it's like working in a wind turbine. I do apologize, the photos aren't optimal, but you can imagine it's quite difficult to get multiple people in a wind turbine and taking good pictures and these types of things. But just draw your attention, if you just look at the posture, one knee's bent, one knee's kind of extended, there's some torso rotation. Here, again, kind of squatted or crouched down on the ground. There's some PPE that's involved, some gloves, and I just wanted to show these just to give folks that might not be as familiar an example of what this looks like, particularly torquing and tensioning, because we're going to spend a little bit more time discussing it. So focusing on some specific ergonomic hazard identification elements, we asked WinTechs to rate the number of times they might be exposed to different types of what I would call high-level hazards. So can we identify some of these? And again, if I kind of walk through top to bottom, on a daily basis, most WinTechs that responded are working in a tighter restricted space. Most of them are required to bend and twist at the waist. Most of them are required to bend their wrists up and down frequently. Again, most working with arms above the shoulders. So we're starting to paint a picture that probably supports some of the self-reported discomfort scores, and starting to identify aspects or movements associated with the work of a WinTech that might be particularly problematic. Again, following up on some MSD hazard identification. Do any of your job tasks require you to repeat the same movements or actions more than a few times a minute for more than 30 minutes at a time? And yes, obviously, most of the WinTechs there responded that they're certainly performing repetitive movements. They're lifting, pushing, pulling, moving heavy items. And again, this is just a quick link to the bottom of the particular survey that we used for this question from the msdprevention.com website. So again, what we're trying to do is just build some evidence, understand a little bit more about the hazard exposures that are present, and use that information to inform our strategy going forward. Targeting specifically MMH tasks, we asked, what is the approximate weight of the heaviest thing you lift, push, pull, or move? And I've drawn a little line here in the 20 to 25 kilogram row. Just using this as an example of, under ideal conditions, if I was using a NIOSH lifting equation and all of my multipliers were 1, for example, my recommended weight limit would be 23 kilograms. Now, we can imagine, just based on those pictures we saw a few moments ago, the lifts that are being performed by WinTechs are likely far from ideal. So obviously this is probably an overestimate of what would be appropriate. But what's really compelling is how much weight is being moved by WinTechs, either on their own or as a team. And one of the interesting things about this is, and Phil can follow up a little bit later on this as well, but there are often in many wind farms policies and practices in place around lifting and around how much weight should be lifted safely and team lifting and these types of things. So this is a little bit surprising in that there are policies that suggest the maximum amount of weight lifted should be minimized, and where it exceeds certain requirements, team lifting should be used. So certainly points to an area where we can strengthen awareness of those policies and adherence to those policies potentially. What is the heaviest item that you lift, push, pull, or move? So again, we allowed WinTechs to openly report these and then clustered them into categories. And the predominant response was related to tool bags and service kits. So just equipment, equipment and tools down here, but the tool bags and some of the things that they're carrying in those tool bags to perform those operations, 40% of our respondents indicated that's the heaviest item they carry. So again, starting to maybe initiate some thought about, well, how are they carrying these? Do they have access to service elevators? I started thinking we do a little bit of work in the paramedic sector. Should we be moving to backpacks? And again, obviously these ideas need to be fleshed out, but this initial evidence about some of the exposures that WinTechs face can start to point us in directions about how we might move to intervene and improve the situation. We asked them to rate their level of concern for injury related to each of the following activities. I do apologize, there is a lot on here, and I'll kind of walk us through. So I've rank ordered them from activities that had the most responses related to being very concerned or concerned, and where the bottom is activities that our respondents felt the least amount of concern to. So again, I highlight this because awkward postures emerged again as being very concerning or concerning for many WinTechs about the prospective role of these awkward postures on injury. Come back to heavy lifting, repetition, so absolutely some challenges there. And I include a number of these, again, just to reinforce, we know there's issues related to standing and walking and seating and these types of issues, but from a WinTech's perspective, this is not where we likely want to prioritize our ergonomic intervention efforts at this stage. We might likely have much more bang for our buck by diving into ladder climbing, some of the repetition related to torquing, tensioning, manual materials handling, awkward postures. Thinking a little bit about the duration of exposures. So again, what you see along the x-axis here is a series of ergonomic hazards that may be present. And then what we asked respondents to do is indicate the amount of time or the duration that they perceive to be exposed to these hazards. And again, acknowledging that self-report certainly has its limitations, but this does give us an indication. What we see here is some interesting trends. So when we're looking at reaching behind the body, bending and twisting, so these kind of gross motions, they tend to be weighted a little bit more towards shorter periods of time. So I tend to have higher bars on the left side that represents shorter periods of time. As we move to some of the arm upper extremity intensity work, we start to see some increases in the duration. So we see more, or we see higher responses related to larger number of hours working in these or being exposed to these particular hazards. So opportunities for controlling hazards. We also asked WinTechs, what would you do if you could change aspects of your job to improve your ability to conduct your job safely and without threat or risk of MSD? What would you do? The most often suggestions that occurred most often were related to space clearance and access. So this maybe isn't surprising when we think of the concerns around posture. Ergonomic design more broadly, which is tied to a number of attributes. We'll talk about that more in a moment. Climbing, lifting assist elevators. So you can see, again, kind of identifying or sort of asking questions differently to triangulate where WinTechs feel some of the problems are. And certainly we see some coherence between what they would like to fix and what they feel aggravates their injuries from the previous slide as well. So again, starting to point us in a direction of some actions moving forward. Just a quick example, you can read on the screen for just a moment here some of the detailed text examples that were binned into these overarching categories. I'll just pause for a moment. So again, lots of tight locations, that's very difficult. There's some very specific attributes, things like locking pin pump locations. I'll come down, lighter tensioning tools, more power assisted tools. So lots of information that's both broad, but also a number of suggestions that are very specific that we think might be very actionable to improve the situation. So what we've learned, what I want to do now is take some of this data and try to express some of the recommendations that we've made based on this information. So first, we want to verify, is this information relevant? So we have some colleagues on the line, Dr. Gemma Milligan and some of her colleagues from the UK, who've done some similar work in the offshore wind energy, and they've identified a number of physically demanding tasks. So just as a point of comparison, they identified ascent of the tower as being physically demanding. Well, that matches with some of our findings: torquing, tensioning, manual materials handling, changing components, postural demands. So some differences. Obviously, there's some unique attributes about offshore that are different from onshore, but a number of similarities as well. So this gives us some evidence to, and strengthens our belief that the data that we're gathering is appropriate, it's on point, it matches with some similar data in the field. So we're excited about that. Provides a nice point of verification for us. Thinking a little bit about what we've learned, we want to make sure that our approach is grounded in the hierarchy of controls. So we've talked about things like workspace layout design, torquing, tensioning, manual materials handling, and climbing. So now continue to work with Canwea around coming up with strategies and identifying specific targeted programs to intervene on some of these issues, but grounding that discussion within the context of the hierarchy of controls that we're familiar with. So first, again, thinking about elimination through better workplace design. And I'm just, again, to provide some evidence for the argument, postural demands were often identified as aggravating or causing discomfort. Awkward postures were often, wind techs were often very concerned that these might cause injury. And then when asked, what they want to improve, well, space clearance access. So that really points to the design of the wind turbine. So as a part of a longer term strategy, being able to inject HFE into design, I think is probably a really important venture within the wind energy sector to ensure that the future of wind techs, we can continue to prevent injuries, design those spaces to ensure that maintenance and operations folks have been considered in terms of how parts are replaced and designed and maintained. So again, I think there's a strong argument here to suggest that we should have HFE professionals injected in the groups and in the committees that are developing these types of standards moving forward. So that brings us to our lesson. Wind turbine workspace layout design is problematic. Review design standards. So, where do we have HFE gaps in design standards? And can we address them by continuing to try to include OHS and HFE professionals on those standard development committees? So moving to lesson learned number 2, I mentioned that our data pointed to lighter torquing and tensioning tools. So again, I'm drawing on some data from Dr. Milligan's work, just to give folks on the call a little bit of an idea of the weight of tools that are used, the massive tools that are used. So you can see here some of the torquing and tensioning tools, description of what they are, and then the associated mass. So in many cases, just the tools themselves are quite large, quite cumbersome, which may explain some of the some of the perceived pain that's been reported. So again, torquing and tensioning, we understand is a problem. A couple opportunities here, potentially deep diving into torquing and tensioning activities. Obviously, there's a number of variations of torquing and tensioning, so identifying higher risk torquing, tensioning tasks, so tasks that may be performed more often than others, tasks that require devices that are heavier than others, for example. And then also I think there's an exciting opportunity for folks with a little bit of an innovative mind to develop and explore new tool designs or tool support systems. So especially as where the use of active and passive exoskeletons are growing in some sectors, there may be opportunities to explore the utility of these assistive devices as well in controlled ways. So just wrap up with two more quick lessons and then I'll turn back to Phil. Again, noted some of the challenges around tool bags, the weight of those tool bags, how much mass wind techs are lifting on their own, which brings us to lesson learned number 3. The manual materials handling requirements are quite heavy, they're quite intense. So again, deep dive from an HFE perspective to specifically probe some of these MMH requirements. And again, noting just the math of some of those tools, designing, innovating, redesigning tools, developing tool support systems can likely be quite advantageous in terms of mitigating some of these issues moving forward. Lastly, climbing popped up certainly as a physically demanding task. When we aggregate all the information from an MSD and hazard exposure perspective, it typically rated a little bit lower, which is why we have it 4th in our list here today. Thinking about some of the handbooks and design, and Phil mentioned this, there's certainly a push to include more elevators, service lifts, and things like that into wind turbine design. But again, some really interesting work coming out of the UK. Dr. Milligan and some of her research team have been looking into ladder climbing, and some of their early findings noticed some really intriguing opportunities, perhaps to provide more robust training, exercise fitness interventions, these types of things to help wind techs develop better fitness to perform these physically demanding tasks, but also to explore technique opportunities. So just training on techniques so that they can climb and ascend in the most efficient way to mitigate some of the fatigue that might emerge. I believe that in subsequent seminars in this series, we hope to hear more from Dr. Milligan and her team about some of this work. So again, climbing quite physically demanding. Opportunities to continue exploring potential for elevators, climb assist devices, and again, explore maybe some movement coaching or fitness training approaches. So hopefully that gives a little bit of a summary of what we've learned from the survey so far. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Phil.
Thanks, Steve. Pass that ball over. While we're going back to some other slides here, I mean, it always strikes me whenever I see these results presented again is the potential here, and want to certainly say a big thank you to the CRE-MSD and Steve for doing this work. This is really great and gives us a lot to work with. So I'll talk a little bit here about some of the dynamics, the changes that are happening in the industry, but I'll be real quick because I want to get to some of your questions. So if you haven't thought of any yet, now's the time to start thinking of what you'd like to ask.
So Phil, I'm just going to get you to share your slides.
Bettina, if you could just pass me the ball. I think it defaulted back to you, Bettina, after Steve passed it off.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have control over the presenter ball. Is it still with you, Steve?
Sorry, we're just, it's with you, Bettina. I am not able to pass it to Phil, I apologize.
I'll keep going through this though as we talk. The slides aren't critical, and just to mention some of the trends that we've seen, and we've been talking a little bit about offshore wind energy. So those are wind turbines that are installed off the coast in deeper shallow water, and what we see onshore here are typically smaller machines at this point. However, they are getting quite large. So I just saw a statistic, I think last or Monday, that identified the average megawatt size of a turbine installed in the past year, and it was 2.5 megawatts. If you can see my screen now, you can see that that sits in around this this piece here. So that 2000 year marker was when those were first the advent of that size machine. So we're just now that becomes the normal. Where we are in Canada, we're seeing more of these 4 megawatt machines going in onshore. So these are bigger turbines. They're taller, and as Steve mentioned, some of the base restrictions up there is actually improving. You've got a lot more room to move around, to maneuver. It does mean that the forces are larger, the bolts are bigger, that means the tools get bigger, and there's some things to think about there as well. Here's just a quick shot of the Henvey Inlet wind farm, which went in last year in Ontario. These were 3.5 megawatt turbines and 100-meter hub height, I believe, or maybe even a little bit higher than that. So that's a long climb, but service lifts are certainly making their mark. It's becoming something more commonly seen, as well as lift assist. So these are mechanisms that take a certain percentage of your body weight off of you as you're climbing. You still go through the motions, but you're climbing still. There are some regulatory barriers that we see to service lifts in the country. It's a unique application, right? To see, I mean, behind a locked door, you've got a lift that goes up and down that's used maybe a handful of times a year, and yet they're spread out all over the provinces, and the regulatory framework for maintaining and keeping those going can be a challenge for some wind farm owners. So those are the kind of barriers too, and opportunities that we have to work to advocate for a work environment that might reduce some of these exposures. I think I'll leave it there. Just to note that we do have opportunity to work together, as I mentioned at the beginning. Would love to hear your thoughts around this. And Catherine, I think I'll pass it back to you, and I'll just keep my screen live, and we can see if there are any questions from the audience.
Thank you so much, Phil and Steve. Today we've heard about the challenges that wind turbine technicians face related to MSDs and some of the interventions that can help our technicians remain healthier. And I'm going to highlight that we have a question from Mike about the survey. And were there concerns about respondents remaining anonymous? Is that why there was not the results you thought? And if so, how was that addressed?
Yeah, thanks for your question, Mike. The survey was anonymous, so we didn't ask for any information specifically that would allow a wind tech to be identified. There are pluses and minuses to that. One of the pluses, obviously, is that folks sometimes feel a little bit more comfortable responding, or they're willing to participate, knowing that their name's not attributed to it. One of the challenges, though, without having a registry or knowing specifically who's responding, again, it's a little bit of a best guess about the types of information you're getting, and we don't have a way to follow up on non-responders and these types of issues. So the short answer is yes, it was anonymous.
Thanks, Steve. How likely is it that these heavy tools would actually be redesigned?
I can speak to that a little bit. We do see that happening already. So a lot of the traditional tools that have carried over from other industries are hydraulic tools, which come with a pretty heavy set of gear. The advent of the electric tools and torque wrenches has really helped to reduce some weight. There's some study to do there as well, though, because you're still carrying a power pack of some sort to power that up. But yeah, there are opportunities there, along with lifting assist devices up tower. So an internal crane that helps to hold and move things for you so that you can just get it in place and then do the work.
Thanks so much, Phil. Does moving to a larger turbine result in more working space in the hub itself?
Yes, yeah, that's what we're hearing anecdotally from the field anyway, that there's more room to move around. and that is alleviating some of these tight clearances. It doesn't change the existing fleet that we've got, and we need to find solutions for that, but it's hopeful for the future.
Thank you. And related to the physical demands of climbing, what are your thoughts on how much of that is related to the weight of the tools and the equipment they are climbing with? And tagged on to that, you also commented on fitness and whether or not any fitness training would help.
Yeah, I think great questions. And we're actually hoping that some of our colleagues in the UK have done some very specific work targeted to this. So we're hoping that that particular question will be addressed in some detail in the next webinar series. Phil, did you have something you want to add about kind of the Canadian context there briefly?
Yeah, well, what I'd say, because if you haven't seen these things, it's hard to picture it, but they will all, as far as I know, have an internal crane that goes from the bottom to the top. So when we talk about manual materials handling or hoisting these tools up and down, a lot of them have the opportunity to put it in a tool bag, and then it gets winched up automatically. Now, that still means you've got to pull that tool bag in or lift it or move it on the platform or something like that. And that's where I think those results, Steve, that you were showing about here's the limit for a single lift, people are going over that because the crane can lift more than that, but then they have to move it once they get it up there, right? And so that's where there's actually more opportunity to unpack the bag or do two bags or two lifts, that kind of thing.
Okay, we also had another question related to the weights being lifted. Is the average age of the workforce in this industry younger, would you say?
Do you want to take that, Steve?
Yeah, I think, well, yeah, Phil showed some slides there earlier on that I think speak to the fact that on average, the workforce is a little bit younger, and certainly based on the survey responses, we had a number of folks that had 5 to 10 years experience, but this was likely their first job out of school, so their relative age was still quite young, yes.
Okay, thank you. And some may assume that would have a positive correlation with being able to handle higher weight.
Well, it's actually interesting. It's counterintuitive, or maybe not for those on the line, but what we find is some of the more experienced and senior technicians, they know how to climb that ladder without going home sore at the end of the day. They know their limits, they know their body, and so if you get in a young go-getter who is really keen to make their mark, they believe in what they do, they might hurt themselves because they're pushing too hard. Whereas the more experienced older guys will take their time, they'll take those little breaks along the way, and split it up. And so that kind of training doesn't always roll out, right? It doesn't always translate immediately, and it takes some time for people to learn.
That's an excellent observation, Phil, and I see that comes across in a lot of our webinars related just to experience. The next question we had was related to the data, and was it further analyzed to correlate worker perceptions concerns to manufacture and purchase options in the turbine farms themselves?
We haven't come through to that level per se. We do have a little bit of data that we did not share today around the types of wind turbines where respondents were working. So we do have a little bit of information that suggests differences in the perception of, let's say, effort associated with climbing in a 1 megawatt tower versus a 2 or 3 megawatt tower, for example. So we have some of that, but we haven't dove into that in as much detail yet.
Great, thank you. And the last question I will put out there, and anything that isn't answered today, we will certainly follow up with the presenters and share the results with all of you. Will this survey result in some health and safety training program? And is there presently a technical course that one could take to become a technician?
I can take that one. Just to say that first of all, yes, there are training centers across the country. A lot of the colleges will offer a course like this, either a renewable energy technician or a specific wind energy technician. And we've been working with them directly to make sure that they see these results so that they can get this into that front end training. This in itself hasn't turned into a training program for us, and that wasn't the intent, but it certainly will inform our discussions going forward. And Steve, I know you have some hopes for where this can go as well, so I'll leave you a chance to say something there.
Yeah, and I think, you know, this ties into some of the other questions that were listed there as well around torque values and things. This was meant to sort of be a population level attempt to gather some information and to help highlight and prioritize where to go next. With respect to things like health and safety training programs, I think there's lots of opportunity there. And now we know maybe specifically where we can start to develop and what activities we want to target those health and safety trainings around initially as we grow out those options.
Thank you. I want to thank both Steve and Phil for their presentations today and to all of our participants. And we encourage you to join us for our next wind energy webinar, which we will be sending an announcement shortly about, and we expect that it will be by the end of June. This was an extremely interesting topic, and we're just thrilled to be able to bring this series to all of you. If you have any additional questions, please don't hesitate to send them our way, and Phil and Steve have provided you with their emails. They are on the screen and they will be available in the slide deck that you receive. Thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. Have a great rest of the day.